ruling government because we are already seeing that, for example, like when we rather will attack the special rapporteur, or even myself and my colleagues being written in their this nationalist associations publications, and being called as really like a derogatory kind of words, including like female dogs, for example, things like that. And our photos being posted, and we get calls, we get messages on Vibers and Facebook, but then the question is like, when somebody talk about the military generals in particular, any officials in the army in particular, can be the action is taken immediately, even without the law existing there. So I think that's also something we are very unsure among ourselves of how do we balance it when we want to ensure there's such hate speech targeting the ethnic minorities or religious minorities or particular group of people with like instigating that kind of the actual action from the majority to discriminate or like violent. But then on the other hand, would that be in favor of the government? So I think that's also a problem for us at the moment.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that very interesting question, and the response is also very, very interesting. I'll just warn our panelists that, of course, that was the first thing we discussed, so we perhaps spent more time on it than we will on the others. But just to say, to warn you, because you have the questions in advance, in consultation with Indian, I'm going to combine some questions, or we may not go through in the same order, just to, as I suspect we won't get to everything we would have hoped if we had the whole day together. So I'm going to move to the next question now, and as I say, we'll try and stop with enough time before the end for a more general discussion. But the next question picks up on something I think Omar mentioned in her earlier comments, and that is, on the one hand, a longer history of sexual violence related to conflict, but not only related to conflict, as a common element in both countries. And then also, of course, all human rights defenders in both countries face a range of challenges and have and continue to. But then when you layer multiple layers of discrimination on top of things here, you're both the women human rights defenders. So I would also invite you to talk about the particular challenges perhaps for women who are actively participating on human rights advocacy or other issues related to political change and so far in each country, and to talk about the sexual violence, sexual discrimination in general. Maybe this time we'll start with Omar.
Well, the sexual violence or the rape, particularly the state authorities, starting from the army to the local officials, that's been for a long time in our country. It came to my attention since I was 18 years old, and I'm now 48 years old. So 30 years, that's been the history. Along with that issue's been never addressed under the rule of law. So because we lack the rule of law, there is a total absence of rule of law, we continue to, even in this country reform time, the army continue to commit the same. There is no action taken against the perpetrators. But what are we seeing now? Also in the local areas, but particularly when you go more rural and remote areas, not even the armed conflict, but even no armed conflict areas, you are seeing the civil administration people, also who come from the army background. They are retired army people. So those who are the civil administration people are actually, they are committing the sexual violence against the women in the local communities who are, like economically deprived of any access to the economy, who are widows or, whose husbands went abroad across to Thailand for migrant workers or whatever, and then left with the children in the village, and they have no, access to any economic opportunity. So many of these women are being sexually assaulted or taken as the, smaller number of as wives of the village head or the local administrator and things like that. But there is no way of addressing this in any of the legal system in the country. But what is happening to the women's human rights defenders, women who become very active, especially since the country opened up, women who are in the locally trying to organize themselves, the women whose land being grabbed, or like the student activists themselves. So when the women come to mobilize, those authorities are actually now targeting these women, even like bluntly in public, saying, if you continue to do this, if you continue to expose this kind of information, you will get raped. So that's where things are at the moment. People like myself, even like, in Yangon, my other colleagues who've been attacked online because we are against these laws proposed by the nationalist Buddhists on the interfaith marriage and religious conversion laws and population control law. And so basically, even for us, we are now started to be very careful. Do we get into the taxi? Because even in the taxi, some people see us from the TV, they recognize. So if we say anything, publicly, which we say publicly, then we can get targeted even in the public domain that we don't have anywhere to go. And we addressed this to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, and she told us, go and file the complaint at the police station. But the reality is, you can't really, the police are completely helpless. There's nothing you can do there. So.
It has been very challenging to Sri Lankan women activists to deal with, especially the issue of sexual violence that had taken place during the time of war. Let me zoom on there. Partly because the fear that prevailed and which is still prevailing in the country with regard to coming out with evidence. So that has been, I would say, my own painful challenge, where when I see a lot of documents coming out of the country, but the information inside the country is still hidden. The Sri Lankan state has remained in a state of denial with regard to the violations committed by the armed forces. Somebody recently, in this very free atmosphere, told me, why have you all not taken up the issue of sexual violence of women? And I think it came from one of the state officers. So then I said, if he had spoken about what happened to women in the areas where military was not in occupation, but the military was transiting in certain cities like Anuradhapura, which is a very sacred city, where the sex workers have increased. I said, if I had spoken about that situation, I would have been called a traitor, because I was talking about the army that is performing a heroic struggle for the Sinhala community. So if I had spoken about even the fact that sex workers have increased in areas where the army is transiting, I would have had disappeared, or I would have been dealt with by the state then. So there were certain areas with regard to sexual violence which still remains to be unraveled as coming from Sri Lanka. Apart from the Channel 4 video, I would say the Channel 4 is only sort of tip of the iceberg, I would still say, because you saw something happen, but the day-to-day experience of Tamil women during the conflict is not known, because partly in our parts of the world, I'm sure even in Burma, it's very difficult to speak about rape, because if the woman has to still live in the village, live with the community. When community protection is not there for a woman who has been sexually violated and raped, and I think that's one of the biggest issues I would like to deal with in our societies. How do you deal with sexual violence? I mean, it's an issue of military rape, another issue. But I think our societies are not kind enough to women who have gone through forced rape or sexual harassment. So I think it's also the cultural context that we need to also deal with. Not only the issue of law and dealing with the perpetrators, but the women are unable to access justice. Women are afraid to go to the police station. Women are afraid to use the existing laws, even in normal times, in normal areas, non-militarized areas, because the society will not accept her as a woman who can live with dignity in our society. I have several cases where we are dealing with these cases, but in a very secretive manner. As a human rights defender, I feel bad. I can't talk about these cases, can't come out openly, because the woman has to live in the village. She has to get married again in the future. Even if she has a child, her child's whole future is with that social attitude. So this is a very sexual violence, gender-based violence, rape during armed conflict is to me a very human issue of humanity of the woman. And I think our societies are not dealing with it. Our movements are not dealing with it. And our non-state actors are also not dealing with it. When you recruit women into your armed forces by non-state actors, what happened to them? Sri Lanka is facing a very difficult situation with regard to former women LTT combatants. I worry for them, because even their society is not behaving respectfully towards them. Sinhalese, the armed forces will look at them as possibility of being sexually used. So their life, they are living with a sense of trauma. And in a country where mental trauma is not also accepted as a possible outcome of a post-war social consequences. So it's a very difficult situation for women in a post-conflict Sri Lanka, especially Tamil women who have been living in the war-affected areas, and we've not been able to deal with politically, or as the Sri Lankan government putting a plan of action focusing on these issues, and the NGOs have not been able to deal with it, because nationally it remains a crowded and a denied state. With regard to me and how we are portrayed as women human rights defenders, I've been called from a prostitute to a person who sells information to the country. I have gone through that. There have been times when I would not even expose myself like you say to the public. There are times when I behave like a recluse in the house. I don't go out during that period when they portray us in such bad ways. There have been times when I have not even shared with my friends that I would share, that I have received enough postcards to my house saying, "We will rape you in the Galle Face." Galle Face is a huge public park near the sea, which is public. Everybody comes. So when you get a postcard to say we will rape you in that public arena, and we have had to live with that and risk that. I've got in Faces, I've got the same kind of postcards in 1989 period, when we had the Sinhala Nationalist Forces working with the army. Then I've got one as soon as I returned back from whatever I was in 1994. Then again during the last period of war. Same kind of postcards. I kept the postcards saying that I will include that in my autobiography one day. you know, so that people will see the kind of threats we face through. So this is something that I think even at the UN level, I'm just returning back from the Commission on Status of Women, where we had a panel on women human rights defenders, where we raised the issue of the inability of the United Nations, despite its declarations and words of protecting human rights defenders, that it has yet failed to put in place an effective mechanism to monitor. You know, they did give us protection at the time when the Sri Lankan government attacked human rights defenders and us as women, and we would express our appreciation for that. But then what action do you take with the state after that? You know, the UNSC Secretary General will come out with the report. But how do you deal with the perpetrators? The name of the minister is already mentioned, who said that he will break our limbs and our necks. You know, that's a violent statement by a former deputy minister of the Sri Lankan state, and he remains as a member of parliament still in Sri Lanka. You know, how do you deal with this? It's not whether it is Mahinda Rajapaksa or whether it is Maithripala Sirisena for me. It's a state. The state of Sri Lanka has to be dealt with by the United Nations, as a member of the United Nations, so that the political leaders who come after them will learn a lesson, will know that they can't behave like that. So I think there is also the responsibility of the United Nations to come up with a mechanism with regard to how do you monitor this kind of situation of women human rights defenders and women human rights defenders at risk.
Okay, well, thank you to both of you for I think highlighting how even in situations of political opening and reform, often dealing with violence and discrimination against women is not somehow found amongst the topics of priority for reform, and then also how violence against women, discriminatory attitudes, discriminatory speech and threats are used as a very specialized tool for attempting to suppress women human rights defenders. So again, I invite maybe one question on this. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sibahani Rajamanathan from the UK, from the Tamil Guardian. I just wanted to start by thanking both of you for raising the issue of, so female human rights activists, often the criticism they get is very sexualized, it's very sexual in nature, and I think that's, we don't talk about it enough, we don't raise that issue, so yeah, thank you for bringing that aspect of it. I was just interested in the fact, talking about the reasons why Tamil women don't go and seek advice. I know you mentioned the social stigma, which is there, and I think that unfortunately it's there in lots of communities affected by mass rape, sexual violence, where women are targeted. And I must add, men as well who are raped and affect sexual violence are also affected by that social stigma. I did wonder though, I mean, we're in Sri Lanka, I can't really speak about Myanmar, there have been no prosecutions of Tamil women or men getting targeted by sexual violence. This is, I'm not just talking about the end of the war, which we obviously is very topical in the Human Rights Council, but pre that. So pre the last regime, we're going right back to 50s, 60s, 70s. There's literally been none. So in a situation where no one has been held accountable, and I must add that we're talking about Sinhalese security forces raping Tamil women, Tamil men, why would a woman go and seek that sort of, there's no security, there's no kind of safeguard, no reason why she would believe in the criminal justice process in Sri Lanka. And I think from that perspective, so Channel 4, I know you mentioned that, and I think, yeah, absolutely right, it's definitely the tip of the iceberg. We have serious difficulties getting information out from the northeast, from the Tamil areas. In a situation where the current government and even, I would say, the majority, unfortunately, of the south don't accept the evidence there. It's fairly well said that this is just lies. It's not true what the Channel 4 video shows. Again, that kind of doesn't inspire confidence, I think, in the Tamil community, where they just don't believe that they can see any sort of justice or seek any reprieve for what's going on within that state.
thank you for bringing up that major challenge of the culture of impunity that we have dealt with, pre-war, post-war, whatever, in Sri Lanka. But there has been one or two cases of Krishanti Kumaraswamy and a case in Mana, I can't remember, where we've had legal action taken. Krishanti Kumaraswamy's is just one. I just want to just say. But with regard to your intervention of why should Tamil women have the same would go for the single women. If you look at the post-conflict records of rape, increase in rape in Sri Lanka, it's high, and especially higher in the southern region. It does not get the northern statistics, I can't remember, but these are police statistics, which says that rape has increased from 900 in 2011 to 1,500 or 1,653 in 2013. And we've done, there is a study that is now revealing situations as to why women have not gone to police with regard to the lack of confidence in the judicial processes. Especially the study is commissioned by the former opposition leader, which was launched recently. I don't have all the details with me, where we are now looking at the possibility of judicial reforms and to have special courts for women with a lot of protection. It's one thing to despair with regard to the fact that women are not seeking the existing judicial avenues available. But on the other hand, we should also look at the judicial system, and if women want to use that, it's not that if rape is a penal code offense in Sri Lanka. So we need to go through a lot of reforms with regard to the rape laws, the judicial processes, giving confidence to women to access that, because justice has to be has to prevail, rule of law, and the perpetrator has to be punished, whoever that may be. So it is partly a legal process, partly a social issue, partly a problem that we need to deal with. While I despair that nobody has confidence in anything in Sri Lanka, I don't think I want to live in a country, continue to live in Sri Lanka with that sense of despair, where women are raped and women are pushed into silence. Could it be Tamil, it could be Muslim, it can be Sinhalese. I think it is not only the issue of militarization and war per se, but it is the patriarchal social patterns in our countries that have silenced women, that have silenced society, that has created this kind of a judiciary and this kind of investigation that is lacking, and I think I would want to improve it. Not improve, I don't know whether I'm saying using the correct word. I want a better Sri Lanka, and I want a better world where women would be able to openly, transparently seek justice, and where perpetrators are punished, and that rape is not thought of as a done thing. I remember having this discussion with some of the Indian very high-ranking officers during the IPKF time, where we went in a delegation because we received a lot of information about rape of Tamil women during IPKF time. He said, "Oh, that often happens every day in Kashmir. So why are you here for? What is the justice you are asking for?" We were really shocked. We came back with that sense of, oh, that happens during the war. So it's women are like part of shaming community in times of war. So with that kind of mindset of political leaders and statesmen, so-called statesmen, we have a long way to go. But I'm not in a sense, I'm not sharing this denial of the Sri Lankan state in a sense of despair. Justice have to be done to every single woman and man who has faced the crimes, and if it has to be war crimes, of crimes of humanity, we have to face up.
Just very quickly sharing the Burma case is like I was saying, there is no way to address these issues because there is a complete lack of absence of the rule of law. So even like just last December, there was a rape and brutal murder of 2 young Kachin women who are the volunteer teachers. We believe by the Burma Army because our organization's been documenting for many years, and there are hundreds of cases of Burma Army committing sexual violence against ethnic minority women. And so the community was also very outraged, and given all the the evidence that they collect or they know, but the army immediately came and told the community, threatened them to stop, while tried to give the cash to the girl's family, for example. But of course, that's been the same also behavior that the army, the Tamador, the Burma army is always being above the civilian rule in the country, of course, and until now that's the case. So we can't, all the women particularly in the armed conflict areas, they are not able to, the community, if a woman is raped in the village, the community or the village man will ask that woman to just leave immediately, because the whole village can be burned down because of that case. So it's actually more than double and triple what do you call it? Violence to the women. But again, that's the reality, because if a village or family complain, then that's what really happened to the whole community. So I think that's something with the Burma situation, but yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing those experiences and views, and indeed commonalities in both situations of grave concern. The next question, the next topic we're going to turn to is now here in Geneva, in a way, and what's going on at the Human Rights Council, and your views on how this impacts at the national level. Perhaps we'll start with Myanmar, and in a context here at this session, for instance, where some states that are supportive, well, I suppose all states would say they're supportive in one way or another of the country, but some of the states who say that have called for the special rapporteur to be moved from an item 4 mandate to an item 10 mandate, so from a country of concern to a situation of technical assistance and cooperation, because they say the reform process has advanced so much that this is a better mode for the rapporteur to be operating in. Omar, from your point of view, I'd be very interested to hear about what impact you see the special rapporteur, the attention of the council on the country having had up to this point, as well as how you see the role in the future.
This has come to our attention since 2013, if I can remember correctly. Immediately after we started to hear that dynamics or the some of the opinion within the council members about the item 4 Myanmar country situation, the civil society on the ground, both who are based in the country and those who are still based outside the country territory in the border areas like in Thailand, everybody got completely nervous. There was a round of consultation and discussion among us, And then we actually came up with a statement issuing, raising our voice how we see the item 4 is still very much needed for the country. Now after 2 years of that call, after 2013, if you look at where Burma is in 2015, compared to 2013, there are even more violence in different areas, in different contexts. If you ask me my opinion, what I think, I would just say that as a Burmese, I want to see my country out of this item 4 as soon as possible. The reason I want to see no more item 4 is because I want to see my country no need of a special rapporteur, meaning the human rights situation of our country's people improved. Since 1992 onward, every year Burma resolution at the UN, GA and the Human Rights Commission and then here now Council, since 1992, that's a long time. You go back and look at all of and make a reference and see what areas of the human rights violations being improved. In the area of forced labor, yes, to some extent. Child labor, child soldier, to some extent. But then, the whole underlying cause, the main perpetrator of most egregious human rights violations in Burma, Myanmar, the main perpetrator is the Burma Army. I'm sorry to say, this is the reality for us. The Burma Army, where are they now? Myanmar Burma need item 4 even more so now than before. Because the country opened up, we have a chance. We have the opportunity and we have the chance to move forward to the right track towards the genuine democratization. But the major stumbling block for that, to improve the country's people's human rights and the country democratization, is the Burma Army, still above the law, above the civilian control. In the current cabinet led by President Thein Sein, you have 4 major ministers' positions are held by the current Army General in service. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Interior, Minister of Defense, of course, and Minister of Border Security Affairs. And that's at the national level. Where did they come from? They are directly nominated by the Commander-in-Chief, appointed by the National Defense and Security Council, where the Commander-in-Chief and the top Army generals are the major control of the decision making. Everything of the national political affairs, the decisions are made by those 11-member NTSC. So that's the national level. But then when you go, we have 14 states and divisions. Each state and division have their own government. Border and Security Affairs Minister for all these 14 states and divisions are also the current Army generals, whereas the 25% of the Army sits in both the national union level and the state and division level parliaments. And you go all the way to the village administration. The village administration people are the ex-army people. So the main perpetrator continue to be controlling the country, where the human rights violations are not being stopped or prevented by the state, where the justice is not being addressed, perpetrators are not being held to account, where the most important need of any country where the people's human rights can be protected is the independent and effective judicial and legal system, which is also complete lack in the country, complete as an absence of the rule of law. So in spite of the country open up with the opportunity for the country to move on, we are much more in need of the item 4 more than ever before, because your support on item 4 for the next few years is going to really help strategically for this country to move into the right direction.